Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I'm the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization and the herein sponsor of this podcast. So I appreciate you so much, Telehelping, for allowing me the opportunity to talk to great people like Frank. Frank, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thanks for having me on here. Looking forward to this conversation and really just doing it, dude. I love connecting and really just looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, Frank, I had this call today because I have to let you go. So
What's that?
I always fire all my people on Friday, Frank. No, Frank, just pull your leg, but excited to chat with you and get to know you more as well. And, I think that's a great place to start. Frank, tell us, who are you? Who are you? Who is Frank? And so the listeners can know this guy before we kick off too far.
Yeah. So my name's Frank Palomino. I am a CPA. I run a virtual accounting firm. I've been doing that since 2017. I've always had just an entrepreneurial spirit, even in high school. I remember carrying a duffel bag with me into school, and filled with Little Debbie snacks and a whole bunch of other crap. But, I was just always trying to hustle and get things going. And, you know, I went into college, not as an accounting major, actually. I was a music education major, and music is my first love, but when I got into student teaching and whatnot, that just wasn't my cup of tea. And I knew I wanted to go into business, and I always heard accounting was the language of business. So
Yeah.
I dove in and started learning the numbers. I think the main reason was, for me, I know that I always heard so many horror stories about entrepreneurs and businessmen losing everything because they don't keep track of the numbers or they're not paying attention to that. So I didn't want to be blindsided by that. And that was my first thing with accounting, right? I need to get some type of education there. That way I know the numbers. Because that was one of the things in high school, selling me all these little Debbie cakes. I knew I was making something, but I didn't know how to track it or do it or figure it out like the best way, right? And honestly, I was probably eating most of the profits anyway. But that's one thing that's subsided since. It's been fun. I enjoy thinking about business. I enjoy figuring out problems, and I just didn't want to have that ignorance when I was running a business. So that's why I jumped
Frank,
into it, man.
that's great. And when you talk about horror stories, I've been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you're a new entrepreneur, sometimes all you're focusing is so much on making money and you forget how much you're spending, or really, if you are making money, well, what's good money to be making? If you're making good money, what are you doing with the good money? Right. And so really the need, even if you figured out, the hierarchy of needs in terms of numbers, right?
Right.
Make revenue, make profit, allocate profit, grow business. Like, the cycle continues on, and you can mess up any one of those skills. I tell people all the time, man, there's nothing better than running a business than knowing exactly where you're standing at financially at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Well, when you're not selling Debbie cakes and high school accountant stuff, right? Who's this Frank guy outside of the computer, outside of the accounting firm?
Yeah. So I've been on a journey of self-improvement probably since 2014, when I had landed my first accounting job. And I say that it was probably then, I was back to school and did all the school stuff, but I don't think I was really deep into how can I make myself better until probably around that time. I was sitting in an office and just bored out of my mind, thinking, I can't just sit here all the time. I need to figure out what I want to do with my life. So I started down that self-improvement journey, started buying books, started reading.
What was wrong? What was wrong with the old Frank? Was the old Frank just, sitting at 9 to 5? When someone says self-improve, were you otherwise not well off, not healthy in mind and body and spirit, or were you just think you were just on the treadmill of life wasting away?
That's a good question. So I was sitting in this office and feeling, what's the word? unsatisfied, maybe a little depressed. And I
Yeah.
say that because I didn't have what I thought I was going to have in terms of an impact to helping clients. I was a tax accountant. I sat in the office and I didn't really touch the other clients and in terms of like helping them out with forecasting, looking at their taxes, looking at their numbers monthly or quarterly. And that was bothering me because I was just the guy that put the data in and looking at everything and seeing like, man, if they did this, that, or the other, they can definitely improve. We're not having these conversations. And in terms of what was wrong with me at that time, right? I felt I was stuck and I didn't know how to move away from that because I think we get when you're employed as a W-2 earner, I think we kind of get stuck in that cycle of, oh, well, this is okay. This is easy. This is comfortable. This is predictable. Um, but we also lose a lot of the time that we have for ourselves. And I think that's probably what my biggest thing was. I was sitting in this office 9 to 5 and probably, especially in the summertime for accounting firms, nothing to do, like absolutely nothing. And that was horrible because I wanted to do things, but I couldn't. Like I'm literally just kind of bound to this desk because I can't do anything else. I can't go and try to figure something out. I'm constantly asking what I can do to help the organization. Um, but nothing was happening. It's always like, no.
It sounds like
No.
you're describing I truly believe from my perspective that entrepreneurs are, the first iteration of the matrix. We get presented with a choice of blue pill or red pill.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just had this conversation. I say this a lot on my podcast, maybe because I have great conversation a lot, but I was just having this conversation yesterday. And, I was telling everybody, I'm like, well, imagine if everyone were able to be us, Frank. And they can be. So
Right.
spoiler, they can't because, I live in Mexico. Who's going to pump the gas? Because you don't pump your own gas. They have gas attendants. There's someone behind the counter. There's someone at the grocery store, the restaurant, the dishwasher, the chef. Like these people, they don't have the ability, or even most of them, oddly enough, don't even have the desire to be like, you know what I want to do? Make my own problems every day. you know, you know what I want to do? I want to wake up every day with problems I may not be able to handle. So, but
Oh
I'm going to
yeah.
figure it out, right? We need those people. They have to exist. And unfortunately for you, you're one of the people who decided to exit the matrix. And because you were having that thought process of like, there has to be something more than this. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I mean, I was right there with you because, and I learned this about myself over time as well. I used to run a company as a CEO, and I thought I was an entrepreneur. Turns out I wasn't. Turns out I was just a really fancy employee. And I was like, oh, I work for myself. I started this company, yalla yalla yalla. And then, I was like really mad all the time, and it turns out I was a little depressed myself, right? And then now I know that about myself. So when I'm easy to frustration, I realize I'm like, oh, well, what's bothering me? Like, and it's definitely not this thing that I'm mad at, right? This situation that I'm, aggravated with. It's something else, right? It's very rarely the thing that's in your hands. And so, but that's a good thing that you create that awareness. So I imagine from that awareness, you started your self improvement.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you're talking
Yeah.
about being like angry, right? And then like, like because you can't do anything about it. And I think I ask myself that a lot too when I'm feeling just anything. I'm a practicer of meditation, and like introspectively, constantly asking like, what's wrong? What's really the underlying feeling here? And I always pinpoint it down to a couple of things. For me, it always seems control, like a loss of control with how things are going to end up. And I've come to terms that I can't control that. So there's no sense in being angry about it, but rather do what's in my control to kind of help lead that situation to come out to the outcome I want. But ultimately knowing that I can do what I can do. And aside from that, there's nothing more
Well said.
that I can do.
Yeah.
So
I tell that to my wife all the time, right? Can't get like what am I to do about something I have zero influence on, right? It's like the old saying, like when they say fly safely, like I'll do the best I can from row 34. I'll text the pilot, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we're And talk to me about this, because being an entrepreneur, right? You run your own company now. You're
Hmm.
in charge of a lot of your life.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself more frustrated with the things you can't control because you're so used to having, say, the ability to exert some type of influence over them, or are you less aggravated by them? Which one are you?
That's a good question. And, and I say that primarily because this past year and a half has been an extraordinarily difficult challenge of growth because of that specifically. Last year, probably about February, is when I hired my first employee. Prior to that, I was always, working alone. There was a period of time where I did have a partner of sorts, but even then, she had her own set of clients. I had my own set of clients, and everything just still felt separate. Like, yeah, I'm working with somebody else, but not really. So last year, when I hired my first employee, I was thinking, hey, I would like to give this employee everything that I would want as an employee in terms of, autonomy in accomplishing tasks and that freedom of time, like, because we're a remote first firm, and the people I hire are overseas, and I want them to be able to have that same freedom that I was looking for as an employee. My my time was one of the more important things. I didn't want to sit in an office if I didn't have to do anything there. And then even how we do things. I think ultimately giving employees the autonomy to make those decisions and really shine versus you need to do this, that, or the other directly, as I say, is really something I wanted to help instill. But where I went wrong was not knowing the difference between delegation and abdication. And I really abdicated everything, right? It's like, here you go. This is now off my plate, essentially. And I was under the mindset of, okay, well, I'm giving them the freedom to figure things out. But I think ultimately what happened was that caused more frustration for them because they weren't entirely sure of what needed to be done. It wasn't, what does done look like?
Yeah.
So I learned right on that there is a way to manage it without feeling like you're micromanaging people. And I think in that sense, since then, I actually fired that other person. Unfortunately, great person. It wasn't working out. At some point, I learned that it wasn't me anymore. Um, and so I had to let him go, unfortunately, but it was a great learning experience. Great person. I wish they were still here, but,
And
um,
you say so many things that, and I want you to know, right? Your approach to mentality things. If you ever want to be one of my clients, I'll take you, right? You know, uh, we don't get many clients like you all the time, right? And just, just for the record, because we're a virtual staffing organization, and one thing that I do is I meet every one of my virtual assistants that work for any one of my clients, because
Mhm.
I want, by the time they get to me, they've already interviewed with 4 people. So I don't really like, they already are qualified. I just want to, like,
Mhm.
what part of Mexico do you live in? Like, what do you like to do? Tell me
Mhm.
about your family. Like who's this
Yeah.
person that we're going to process payroll for, that I'm going to entrust with the relationship with my client, right? And
Mhm.
so I do that because I want to feel like Frank works with Cody. Like, oh yeah, I know Cody. Cody lives in Mexico City, right? Mexico. Cody's a rock climber, right? And so, like, I can, I have those attachments because I want to have them, but very often in remote first firms don't really have a lot of tolerance, right? Like, hey, and I say this to people, and I'm sure if I have clients who watch this, we have thousands of subscribers at this point. I oftentimes respond that human things happens to humans, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
it seems like you get that, but also you're like, okay, well, not everyone's an entrepreneur. Some people need to put some walls up so that I can get them to go down the path.
Right. Right. For sure. And that, I guess that kind of leads into what else I've worked on throughout that past year and a half has been, improving my systems and processes, right? Just, not only that, but I think when business owners start that journey of creating businesses or systems and processes, they're like, we need to document everything. And I'm guilty of it too. When I first started doing it, I wanted to put everything in there, but really learning the difference between what is necessary and actually what moves the needle forward has been an eye opener in terms of just letting them figure things out too, like when I'm delegating tasks over, and then also assigning the ownership of that process or system going forward. Like, this is where it stands right now, but you need to add in your own notes. You need to add in your own links and stuff like that that'll help you maintain this on a consistent basis. And I think that providing that ownership to them really helps supercharge the solidity of that process. Like, it really starts gaining some traction in terms of how well they understand things. So that's one of the things I've been doing as well, utilizing AI. That's
Yeah.
probably one of my first things I go to now, in terms of what I need to delegate out. I've created several prompts. Like, I've been doing prompt things since like 2018, 19. Like, do you remember Jasper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was one of the first things, even before ChatGPT came out. Like, it
Well,
was,
it's like
they're already.
systems, processes, and automations,
Hmm.
are, one of my key focuses all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay, it's a task we have to have someone do, right? Well,
Hmm.
first and foremost question is how repetitive is it, right?
Yeah.
Is it a one-off task or is it a repeated task? Great, it's a
Hmm.
repeated task. Is it a human task or is it an automated task?
Hmm.
Great. It's a human task. It needs decision making, human review, level thinking. Great. And on the other side of that, it doesn't need any thought process. It just needs execution. Can it be Can it be zapped? It can be zapped. Onward and
Hmm.
upward. And so, and I love that process because one thing I always tell my team, because I want them all to think about this all the time, right? Because I have daily boards and project boards.
Oh,
Project
cool.
boards are for one-off tasks. Daily boards are for things that you have to do on a daily basis in a timely manner. But I always have them submit, every person gets to submit to a board something from their daily board that they believe can be automated. I call it a zap list, like a wish list, but a
Okay.
zap list,
Hmm.
right? Can we zap it, right? And then like on a weekly alignment meeting, I'll be like, hey, I looked through the zaps, talked to the ops, and I think we're gonna zap this, right?
Okay.
And so they're gonna zap this first. They're like, good luck with your zap next week. And so we go through. We're always laudering zaps and
Hmm.
everything, but I always tell the team to think the difference between motion and movement, right? Like you can vibrate in place and never move an inch, right? You
Hmm.
did a lot of motion, but you didn't
Hmm.
do any forward movement, right? There was no
Right.
movement. And
Hmm.
so, I always say like, when you're putting in a process, by Lord, there was a period of time where we were death by trackers, right? And so like, what value is it really adding? Is it moving the organization or are we just vibrating in place, right? And so that's a great process that you have going forward. And now looking at that, have you seen or you feel the difference in that
Oh, for
year journey?
sure. Yeah, I think a lot of my initial frustration was, around the clarity of where projects were standing. It's different when you're working by yourself because you always have that stuck in your mind and you kind of know where you need to move forward with. But when you're starting delegating things out and you assume things are getting done, when you go back to revisit and you learn that things aren't, like, it's frustrating because you plan to come in and do a, a certain number of tasks to kind of move that along some more, and you're kind of stuck now. So, since we've implemented, we have daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly tasks in like a recurring list in ClickUp.
Love it.
And those are assigned, right? So we can look at it on a calendar view and kind of see where things are placed, and we can even determine our capacity. Do we need to move something around or move this forward? That way we can make some more time for other things. So learning that too, or even just how to structure it, has been
Yeah.
like one of those. I think initially I spent way too much time overthinking where to put things. And that was one of my downfalls. Is, I think, as entrepreneurs, we kind of get stuck there sometimes on the decision making, but I've been proactively trying to just make a decision, move forward with it. And then at that point, we'll learn what the problems are because we can't foresee everything. And not making a decision is not moving anything forward. So making a decision is what actually does move the needle forward.
Indecision is death, right?
Mhm.
I had a captain in the Marine Corps tell me once, one of my favorite ones. And he's like, you know what? Unfortunately, we have to make bad decisions sometimes, right? He's like, but you gotta make choices. He's like, it's better to make a choice and then to all of us just sit here and die while we're not making choices. He's like, so sometimes you gotta go left, sometimes you gotta go right, but you can't stay in the middle, right?
Right.
And, I think often two times people get wrapped up in the indecision side of things. And sometimes you just have to fail quick. I tell my
Yeah.
team all the time to just make a mistake sooner so we can fix it sooner so we can move forward. My rule is like, if you don't sink the company, I really can't get all that mad, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you continue to make the same mistake over again, that's different,
For
right?
sure.
Much different. Like you're making the same mistake over, we have to ask ourselves, well, what are we doing, right?
Yeah.
Versus, make one mistake once, we apply a process, SOP it, put a
Mhm.
repetitive action, oversight, move forward, right?
Right.
Just go on. Yeah. So, no, I agree. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, when you talked about reading some, and I'm steering the ship a little bit towards the personal development side, you said that you're,
Mhm.
self-improving a little bit. Were you not a big reader beforehand, or is this
I
become something that you just
no, I
wanted to?
no, I wasn't a big reader beforehand. Through college, even through high school, like it wasn't something that I did. And even when I started reading like self-help books or diving into that, it almost felt like I was holding it captive and I didn't want to share that with someone else because almost like a sign of weakness, I think, at that time, or even earlier times, I think there was some type of culture around learning and self-improvement that just kind of is like, no, you don't need to do that type of thing. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
culturally or um, with the people I was surrounded with, right? So when I started doing that, and learning and reading from what people have gone and done for themselves, it was insightful to know that I'm not alone in my own thinking, that I do want something more. And there's other people have gone and done it. So just learning how to get that information and use it for myself, I think was probably one of the harder things that I've learned for myself is like implementing some of those things because we read and read and read. The overthinking again kind of comes into play. But no, it wasn't anything that I did before. And a lot of the books I read now, I'm not a big fiction reader. I think right now I'm reading through Process. I'm not sure if you know Traction
yeah,
stuff. This one has been really nice too, is it doesn't have to be crazy at work. These are from the founders of Basecamp. And
yeah, yeah.
I think that's probably like what it was for me. Is like I'm constantly grinding and grinding and grinding. It's like, well, how am I going to like relieve myself of that? I have a child now, a 4-year-old. I don't want him to grow up remembering daddy always being at work. I want him to know that I've made time for him. And so reprioritize the things that I'm working on just because of that. Um, yeah, just it's been a journey.
I think that's well put. Everyone's self-maintenance is different, right? I consider myself a really good self-care individual, right? Like I take care of myself very well, right? I think about the hierarchies of total needs, my needs,
Mhm.
family needs, kids sides. It's probably most time why I don't work past 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? I'm up
Mhm.
very early. I do a lot of work hours before my podcast. I do my podcast 9 a.m. for me is like midday, right?
Mhm.
I've already been working for a while, and so take the kid to school if he needs to go to school, and then come back, do more work, and then be done by the time he's ready to get picked up. And
Yeah.
so, and I've always focused on that, and I think I always say that I'm the best example of application of virtual assistants, right? Because everyone else calls them virtual assistants. I call them my staff members because they are my staff members. Like they're not, well, they are virtual, but when you're in Mexico, they're not really virtual assistants, right? And so they're just my employees.
Yeah.
But I live that life so much because I always ask myself when I'm doing a lot of something, I was like,
Mhm.
can I hire full time for this? Right? Can I get a full time person on this task? I have an executive project manager who's like my catch all for things that
Mhm.
aren't full time, right? That are things that I don't have to do, but aren't full time. But I'm always putting things on their plate and I'm always working with them, delegating right down. And then, it takes time to get them to where I want them on things,
Right.
right? As it takes all things. But
Mhm.
eventually I had that time back and I have to ask myself, I'm like, I've had this conversation with my wife over and over again. I'm like, man, I could, I myself represent, 6 virtual assistants, right? And I'm like, I could make thousands of more dollars a month in my pocket if I didn't have that. But also, like, I would work sun up to sundown. So why would that wouldn't be fun? I wouldn't want
Yeah.
the extra 6,000 to be honest with you.
Hmm.
And so, those are things that I'm always constantly focused on as well. And like, you have to, I think that you're getting there as well as you're asking yourself, like, what's a task that I can do and what's a task I want to do?
For sure. For sure. Yeah. It's energy. Um, Trying to find the right energy things. Just, yeah, I could sit here and do all those things all day, but man, I've tried. I don't know how many different approaches. I'll work in some in the morning, take the afternoon off, or play with my kid, come back in the evening time, and go back to work and grind it. But the energy level is just isn't there.
Yeah.
It's not about the number of hours you put into your work, and I think that's um, kind of antiquated now, right? We're talking about 40-hour work weeks and whatnot, but
Yeah.
there's so many things that we can accomplish now in our time, especially if we're being focused and really utilizing the technologies we have at our hands. It doesn't have to be like that anymore, and I think that's one of the things I'm trying to help my team know too, is that I'm not here to watch the clock for you. But that's not what it is. I'm going to pay you for a set number of hours per week. You're going to report to me on time there, but we're not using the time to bill. Like we're a value based type
Right.
of firm. So we're not billing by the hour, but rather we're looking to see what we're doing repetitively, what we can automate, what we can get off our plates. And ultimately, when I'm bringing them on, I'm letting them know, like, here, I want you to know that I don't expect you to give me all your time. You have your own personal life, and I want you to enjoy that. So when your shift's done, don't feel obligated to respond to a message in one of our
Correct.
platforms. We're done. And we are all adults. And I have an understanding that you're going to get back to me when you get to it. And if we have some type of issue where nothing ever kind of gets resolved, then we need to focus on that and see what's going on. But besides that, we're adults. You can get your things done, and let's work together to figure that out.
No, yeah. I mean, I tell my staff all the time, like, you get paid on a full-time basis, which requires quantifying for
Hmm.
purposes of finance.
Right.
However, we are an achievement-based organization,
Hmm.
like, because we're getting the job done. Like, we can
Yeah.
all work all week and get nothing done.
Hmm.
However, we're a get things done company because that's all I care about. I'm like, I don't care how long it takes you
Right.
initially. If it's always taking you a long time to do something that should take you a long time, let's take a look at it. Like,
Right.
I have a staff member right now on that who's indirectly reported to me. It's like, oh, okay, well, he does a great job, but man, it takes forever to do it.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that. What is it? Is it a technology issue? Is it a process issue? Like, let's
Mhm.
review the approach. And that's important as well because we are running a business here, right? So we need to
Yeah.
accomplish things. However,
Mhm.
I tell my staff all the time, like, I will be messaging you at 9, 10 o'clock at night, Saturday morning,
Mhm.
Sunday evening, right? And so don't message me, right?
Yeah.
I was like, and I tell them, like, you think that, and I've had this conversation, I'm like, you think you're showing me awareness, all
Mhm.
right? However, you have to understand when you acknowledge my task, project, statement, I'm expecting absorption, action, and execution. Right. So if it's not absorption, action, execution time, you should ignore it. Right.
Mhm.
Because once you say yes, then the clock started. Right. So you should
Mhm.
ignore me. And I think that's the thing as well. I tell people I don't work past 1. I'm just not in front of my computer, right? Unless
Yeah.
if I have a sales call, which is primarily all I do for the company, right? Sales,
Mhm.
in that particular case, like, absolutely, I'm going to be in my seat wherever I need to be in my seat. However, if I
Mhm.
don't, then I won't, right? And I think you're right. The establishment has set us up for this thought process that we're too, oh, got to work 40 hours a week, got to punch that clock, got to put in that time, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm going to put some extra hours in after dinner. Like, well,
Yeah.
if I'm working in the evening, something's wrong, right? There's something has gone incorrect. And I'm trying to rapidly fix it.
Mhm.
But other than that, no, and I have it sometimes. I'm sure you do. Like, you're sitting there like, did I work enough today? Did
Oh,
I,
yeah.
did I do enough time today? I'm like, am I
Mhm.
doing the things I need to do to succeed? I'm not sure. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like I worked at all today. I don't think I did it right. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to battle with too, right? Because you're always preaching productivity and getting things done. But there are days where it feels like you're doing things, but really you retroactively look and like, what did I actually do? I think I had one of those days. I have one of those days at least once every week, it just kind of feels like that. Especially when we
Yeah.
have a lot of meetings. I tend to get sidetracked there. I have a great idea to, work a little bit between calls and whatnot. But reality of the truth is some of the work we do is just, it takes more time to get into, and you can't sit down for 15 minutes and expect to get it done. Yeah.
Correct. No,
hmm
I'm right there with you. And Frank, so talk to me about one of the things I do with all my extra time that I have,
hmm
I consult. So I've spent a lot of time consulting with the marketing and sales side with accounting firms.
hmm
And a lot of our clients at telehelping are accounting firms. And so I know accounting firms well. And then I get a lot of accountants on my podcast. However, not an accountant. But chat with me. Like, what does your organization, do you have a niche in particular industry you work with? So
Yeah.
chat with me about what you do.
Yeah. So we're primarily focused within the cannabis industry. Um, I've been working with the cannabis industry since 2019. I think is when I first started getting into it. And it's been a roller coaster, man. They have a lot of problems in terms of um, accounting for things right. And then I think the biggest thing is just it's cash based.
Yeah.
It's a cash based industry. There's limited banking. Those that do have it have strict requirements that are required to report to the bank. Even the monthly fees just to have a bank are exorbitant sometimes too. So yeah, that's who we primarily help. That, and then we also focus on like the wellness side of businesses. So that includes anything from therapists to yogis, massage therapists, all those, and anything and everything that's holistic health, right? Because I'm a big believer in it. I
Yeah.
believe that we get what we give to the world, and taking care of ourselves is one of the more important things of it. Because if I'm not mentally or physically able to think about what I am doing, I can't be the best that I can be for everyone else. And so it's one of those priorities of mine, is wellness, making sure that I'm of sound mind and health.
No, I mean, so I think
hmm
that's great. I've had holdings and investments in the greater cannabis industry myself.
hmm
And so I've been apprised of the cannabis industry for quite a long time before that even. So, love it. I actually have a buddy of mine who owns a security company who primarily focuses on cannabis dispensary security and cash holdings. Right.
Okay, right.
And so here in Vegas, not here in Vegas, I'm in Mexico, but in Vegas, my US home.
hmm
And so that's I find a lot of touching attachments to the industry, right? And you're right, it is a very complicated industry to be in. My friend has told me on numerous occasions the troubles they have with managing and protecting cash. I had a buddy of mine who operated 15 dispensaries.
Oh, wow.
He's since has gone in a different direction. He's liquidated his holdings there just because of, compliance piece, right? It can be
hmm
things are shifting constantly. And I remember this was the early days of legal cannabis. Must have been 2017 or so at this point in time, earlier. All right.
hmm
So almost a decade ago at this point. And he was showing me like where he keeps all his cash, right?
hmm
And I'm not exaggerating when we walked into this room of just black 50-gallon bags filled with $10,000 bundles,
I
right?
believe it.
And
Yeah.
you're just sitting here like, what is going on with what are you, El Chapo? Right? He was a weird individual anyways, right? Like, he didn't have any idea what to do with all the money, right? And it's all cash based. And so it's like, can't put it in a bank, it's federally illegal. And at that time, I don't think at 17 there was a lot of cannabis banks, right? It was still very early on. The
Oh, for
industry
sure.
hadn't caught up with it, right?
hmm
And so you're just keeping it in black trash bags with a guy with an AR-15 guarding it.
Wow.
Right. And so, I
Wow.
mean,
That's nuts.
how did you end up landing, in the wellness side, yogi, right? I love it.
Mhm.
And so, like, how did you land on cannabis though? How, as like,
That's a great
from
question.
all things that you can track money on, why, how did cannabis come about?
Well, it's just something that I've enjoyed for a long time. And I think in college is one of those things that retrospectively helped me a lot more than I'm not going to say that I give it a lot of credit in terms of the way it helped me
Oh,
introspectively
me
look at
too.
my life. Because in college, I was going through some rough times. Actually, in fact, I was drinking a lot, like a lot every day, and,
Yeah.
and college was my I'm out of the house type of freedom type of thing going on. Because growing up, I didn't feel like I had any type of freedom at all. It was just constantly um, under the gun of just being the oldest child, watching after your siblings, making sure you set a good example and all these good things. So when I got to college, it was 8 hours away. Mom and dad weren't around. No one was really keeping an eye on me in terms of like, you need
Yeah.
to do this, you need to do that or the other. And drinking was something that was getting out of hand for me. And I'd never partaked in cannabis during high school, nothing like that. I was 22, I think, the first time I tried it. And I remember feeling a little angry, not, not for trying it. I enjoyed it. Right. But I remember thinking like, man, everyone's saying that this is something that's going to ruin you. And I don't understand because I had this really calming sense of self, and I can hear myself thinking or talking about everything that I probably shouldn't be doing because it's hurting me more than anything else. And that's when I transitioned to primarily just self-medicating with cannabis. And I did find out about 3, 4 years ago now that I have ADD. So
Yeah.
I was self-medicating, not realizing it, right? And
Yeah.
now I take medication and it helps me out tremendously. But then I didn't
Well,
quite.
I think it's a perspective as well because, I grew up the same way, right?
Mhm.
And then I went to the military, and so there really no room for, recreational use of anything, even self-medication of cannabis,
Right.
right? And then I was outside the military, out of the reserves, and everything before I tried cannabis for the first time. I was like, okay, this isn't that bad, right?
Yeah.
Like I thought I thought it was a gateway drug, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I've never
And
wanted to do anything else, to be honest. So yeah.
right. I'm not even, and I mean, like, honestly, like, you know, I obviously recreationally use, and it's completely fine.
Mhm.
I don't, I'm having afraid to admit that I don't think the stigma exists like it used to, and if it
No, not
does,
at all.
you're not
Mhm.
voting for me. I'm not a politician, unfortunately. You don't have to watch my podcast or be my client.
Right.
But the biggest thing is that for me, it's like, you know, and I'm sure you talk about ADHD, like I can't turn off the voices sometimes
Oh, for sure.
that runs my body, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm like, it's like one of those toys where like you push down and it rolls the wheels, and the more you push down, the more it whines. Like
Yeah.
my whine is always rolling, right? Always
Same,
rolling. And for
dude.
me, sometimes, you know, and I know my dosage really well, all right? And I use it in a way that, I really don't need a whole lot to get where I want to
Right.
go, right? And so
Mhm.
in that respect, I do self-medicate, and it's just like hitting pause button for me. Like it's just,
Mhm.
and it's for people who don't understand what you're having a brain like that is like. It's like, try being a parent when you're like sitting there trying to be a parent, but your brain's 30 other places, right? Doing something else, stressing about something that probably doesn't need to be stressed about, right?
For sure.
you know and so
Mhm.
it's like, I always say, it's like Cat Williams used to say. He's like, I don't know if you want half the light bill, a little bit of light bill, you want a down payment now. And he's like, I take a little bit of cannabis. He's like, forget that light bill, I got 30 candles I've been waiting to burn, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and it's, it's a very comical relief way of approaching it, but the truth of the matter is it's, I'll go on a limb here and say that it's made me a capable parent sometimes, because entrepreneurs aren't always built for other things as well as they're built for getting this task done. And
Right.
then all of a sudden you need patience, understanding, and affection. You're like, I'm going to hold this child and have a good time with it. It's difficult. No, I'm right
It
there with you,
is.
Frank.
It is. I can't tell you how much that has helped me in that aspect too. Because there's been periods of time where I don't partake at all, but
Of course, same.
when I'm not, I feel that those irritations, like, because I'm not able to go do something that I want to immediately, or something along those lines. It's like it's underlying there. Whereas if I am self-medicate or medicating a little bit, it helps ease that, and just like I don't need to worry about that right now. Like, we're good. We'll take care of that when we need to.
Yeah. Well, I
It
think
helps me
everybody
be more
should
present.
always yeah, I think all people should understand anything has to be in appropriate quantities and
Oh,
dosage
right.
and
Yeah.
frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer that, like, I love sitting down and having a drink with people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, give me an old fashioned, sit me in a circle, talk with my buddies, right? And like, let's catch
Yeah.
up, right? If you do that every day, right? Well, consider the
Mm-hmm.
consequences, right?
For sure.
Right?
For
Like,
sure.
let's talk about the impact. But no, well, Frank, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I thank you so much for coming on my podcast, expressing a degree of openness, vulnerability that isn't always found in my conversations. And so
Oh,
I've really
thanks.
greatly appreciated connecting with you. Tons
Same
of
here.
value that I think people will find from our conversation today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Cody. It's been a pleasure being here, and I can't thank you enough for inviting me. Thanks. I'm gonna remember this for a while, man.
Of course, man. Sir, have a great rest of your day.
You too, buddy.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.